spend some time with Robert Costa from the Washington Post. We've got him on the line right now. Robert, good morning to you.
Good morning.
How's everything going this morning?
Everything's going well. I was actually in your neck of the woods last week covering the Wisconsin Gubernatorial in Beloit, not too far from Rockford.
Yes, next time, stop on by. Say hi. We'll take you out for lunch.
I would have. I would have tried, but I had to head up to Janesville and then up to Madison. Next time for sure.
Well, that is. I know you've had a couple of stories about the Wisconsin gubernatorial race. Certainly, the people of Wisconsin have been through this a time or two recently with the actual election, the recall. They're doing it all over again, and you've covered it very closely. First for National Review, now for the Washington Post. And your piece basically said that you're not sure you've seen Scott Walker quite this nervous previously. And this could be it will be, I think, for sure. But it could be tighter than he would like.
That's right. I think Republicans have a strong ground game. They come off a 2010 election in which Walker did well. 2012 recall, he did fine. But Walker's real concern is that those who voted for him in the 2012 recall, the moderates, the centrists, the independents, they were voting against the recall by the left rather than for him. And he really is worried that the people for him may not come out because they think he's better than he is. So he's concerned. I think this is a real race. Mary Burke, the Democrat, she's not one of these incendiary Democratic figures, very low-key, and that's helped her.
And it would also seem, and we've heard about this, and just being across the border, it's easy to observe this, just the whole fatigue on how many times does a guy have to run for governor?
I know, 3 times in 4 years. But I'll put it this way. If Walker does end up winning, and he has a very good shot at winning, I think, still. He is Scott Walker. He's won before. But if he wins, that's 3 elections in 4 years. I think he immediately catapults into the top tier of the 2016 conversation.
Robert Costa with us at Washington Post. It's Riley and Scott on WROK. You mentioned this in the piece. We've heard it from a couple of people, and it's self-evident based on what's been happening. That's that Mary Burke, the Democrat candidate, just has not been making a big deal about Act 10, the labor reforms, or repealing them, or doing anything. That has not been a key issue in the race. I would bet that Scott Walker wishes it were. That was what was pretty successful. He could run on his record and say, the reforms are already making changes in the recall. That issue, while not totally off the table, has been downplayed in this particular race, hasn't it?
It really has. And I sat down with Mary Burke herself for about 30 minutes, and she said it's just not what people care about. But I think the strategy behind what the Democrats are doing is they realize you're right. Act 10 and Walker's collective bargaining reforms are pretty popular. Walker probably should even be talking about them a little more because they are the core of his political persona. But Mary Burke has been focused on jobs, the jobs numbers in Wisconsin. That's made the race, in a sense, better for the Democrats because it's about this more minuscule debate on jobs numbers as well as whether Scott Walker, broadly speaking, is polarizing. It's not a debate about the issues that made Scott Walker polarizing. And so it's become a little personal, and it's also just about these jobs debates. And I think Walker he's trying to find his footing in a sense. That's why he's been asking the RGA for more money. He feels like he needs to close strong. He just is not sure right now that he has the momentum.
Robert, what about this talk that you got Christie, potential rival for the 2016 nomination, head of the RGA, holding back some of the dough, doesn't want to get this guy too high up in the spotlight?
Well, there's definitely a lot of conversation that could be the case. When you look at how much money is being spent by the RGA in Michigan, it's around $10 million. When you look at how much is slated to be spent in Wisconsin, it's about $8 million. And when you look at what the RGA spent in Wisconsin in 2012 during the recall, it was around $8.9 million. So you have this issue now where Walker really believes he needs more money. Sorry about this. I'm in Washington, D.C. I apologize for the noise.
No problem.
City has a lot of trouble. So anyway, Walker, he needs more cash. And I think one of the problems for the Republicans right now is Wisconsin and the Republicans nationally didn't really believe that this race was going to be as competitive as it is at the end.
Robert Costa with us, Washington Post. You did spend some time, as you mentioned, Beloit, Janesville, Madison last week. By downplaying Act 10, by downplaying some of the labor issues, does Mary Burke risk not having her base as enthusiastic as it could be? Might that be a concern for her?
Yes, and I saw that on the ground. There's not a a grassroots revolution going on for Mary Burke. Most liberal activists, most labor leaders, they like her. They think she's fine, but she doesn't excite them. They're not enthusiastic about going to the polls for Mary Burke. And when you look at how Tom Barrett, the mayor of Milwaukee, ran his campaign in 2010 and 2012, that was a very labor-heavy campaign, labor rallies, labor people. You don't see that with Burke. However, pay attention to who's coming. She had Clinton come forward on Friday, spoke in Milwaukee, never mentioned Walker by name. To me, that signals that she's trying to go to those Milwaukee suburb voters, mostly Republican, but those who may be sympathetic to a Clinton message that's not very democratic or very progressive. And then she is having Barack Obama, the president, come in this week to Milwaukee, and that's really about African-American turnout, making sure the core of the city turns out for her. So Burke isn't exciting, but she certainly has a closing strategy that's reaching out to certain demographics.
So you got Governor Walker reaching out to the RGA, or the RGA reaching out to him, dumping $1 million or more. Now, Mary Burke, very well financed, money not a problem here?
Yeah, she's doing very well. She's actually has more money than Walker on the airwaves, if you count spending by the Democratic Gubernatorial Campaign Committee, as well as by outside Democratic groups. She's right on par with Walker, if not better.
Before we leave Wisconsin, Robert, I think it was in your piece, you talked to some people who have known Paul Ryan for an awfully long time, Congressman Paul Ryan, who don't think he wants, or will, I should say, don't think he will run for the nomination in 2016. I think he was also on the record tail end of last week saying if Scott Walker runs, he will not be running for the nomination. In his gut, do you think he wants the presidency?
I think it's an open question. I think after spending some time with Ryan, my thought is Ryan is not looking hard to run now. But it is a very long process. We start probably too early for these presidential campaigns. And if Jeb Bush doesn't run and Mitt Romney doesn't run, and even if Scott Walker runs, if those two mainstream establishment so-called Republicans don't run, I think Ryan will inch closer to possibly considering it. He's not gunning for it right now in the same way that Rand Paul is, maybe Ted Cruz and others.
Robert Costa with us, Washington Post, our old pal. It's Riley and Scott here on WROK. Let's move a little south from Wisconsin. You mentioned all the big heavy hitters coming in for Mary Burke. Pat Quinn's getting the same treatment in what should be a relatively safe blue state. Both Clintons have been in, both Obamas have been in. Joe Biden's actually in Rockford today for a Get Out the Vote rally. Are you hearing anything specifically in D.C. about what Democrats think about Pat Quinn's chances here in Illinois?
Democrats in D.C. feel pretty good about Pat Quinn's chances. Their fear is if this Republican tide becomes a Republican wave, Pat Quinn's one of the most vulnerable to being toppled by a wave. And so the infrastructure for the Democrats, the spending, the momentum seems to be on Quinn's side. Republicans aren't targeting Rauner in the same way they're looking at some Senate seats as real pickup opportunities. But Quinn's always consistently been vulnerable, and so Republicans are hoping to close nationally strong. But when you have the president, the vice president, and so many other top Democrats going there, it's one, because they know the president and his administration. That's one of the rare spots, one of the rare states that's still receptive to them politically and encouraged by their appearance. And second, that is a state they need to win. That's the Democratic base.
And you had mentioned the president coming in for Mary Burke as well in a season where so many are pretending that they're not home or letting the answering machine get it when the president calls. It's interesting that especially here in Illinois, a deep blue state, that we are pulling out every stop to bring in every what would be perceived to be heavy hitter to help out Pat Quinn. So his internals must look pretty similar or worse than what we're looking at overall.
I think that's right. It's also a little bit different when you talk to strategists working on Democratic Senate campaigns. They're not really interested in having the president there because it's a federal race. You get closely tied to the White House. But when it comes to a gubernatorial race, whether it's Burke or whether it's Pat Quinn, it's a little easier to bring in the president and to try to get those Democrats ginned up while not being tied too closely to his agenda.
Robert Costa with us just on a minute or two. On the Senate side, I'll ask one question specifically on the Senate races. You have had a good working relationship with Mitch McConnell, and had some interviews with him while at National Review, and I think a few at the Post, too. So are you hearing that they are really concerned about a potential loss? next week. What does the McConnell feel on his reelection bid next Tuesday?
I think they are worried. I think McConnell has run a strong campaign in many respects. He has a good ground game. He has more money than he could ever ask for. So it's not a question of organization or finance, but it's a question of a political win. Allison Grimes is a weak candidate. She's running for her first time statewide, but she does have a certain youthful appeal. She is a female candidate, of course. And when it comes to her politics, she hasn't been able to be tagged as some kind of beltway progressive because she is only running for the first time. She's close to the line with the Clintons. So the McConnell worry is his numbers are so hard, so negative in the state, that he is vulnerable to some kind of tilt at the end.
Robert Costa, formerly National Review, now with the Washington Post. You can check out his stuff, WashingtonPost.com. And I got to leave with this question. Mitt Romney 2016. You've had a couple of pieces on that at WashingtonPost.com. Mitt says no, but things could change. Ann says no. All right. What does your reporting say about Mitt Romney 2016?
I think Mitt Romney is interested, broadly speaking, in running. However, he's not preparing for a campaign. He is going to wait in early 2015, see what happens. But all this talk that he's not interested, I don't believe it based on when I talk to his friends. He's certainly interested, I think, in some sort of comeback. The question is there room for him, and could it be viable? That's what he's looking at.
All right. Something to keep our eye on. Robert Costa of Washington Post, as always, thanks for your time.
Thank you.